The sky above the plains was endless, a vast blue expanse stretching far beyond the horizon. It was here, beneath the shelter of the great, sweeping sky, that the Arapaho people lived, a proud, nomadic tribe whose hearts beat in time with the rhythm of the earth. The plains were their home, their life, and their sacred space, a place where the spirits walked beside them, unseen but deeply felt in every breath of wind and rustle of the grass. Among the tribe was a young warrior named WíiyayA, whose name meant sunlight. He was known for his sharp eyes, which missed nothing, and for his curiosity, which led him to question the world around him. Though he was a skilled hunter, a master of the bow and arrow, and a respected member of his people, there was a part of him that felt a deeper call, one that went beyond the hunt, beyond the physical world. His dreams were filled with visions, strange and cryptic, visions of great spirits that roamed the earth and sky, calling him by name. On the morning when the spirits first arrived, the tribe was preparing for its sacred buffalo hunt. It was a time of great significance, when the people would gather to honor the buffalo, the source of their sustenance and their strength. The hunt was not just a physical endeavor. It was a spiritual ritual, a way of communing with the land and the animals that lived upon it. For WíiyayA, however, this hunt felt different. As the sun began to rise, casting its golden light across the plains, WíiyayA stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of the earth and the whispers of the wind. But today, something felt off. There was a presence in the air, something unseen, but deeply felt, like a vibration just beneath the surface of reality. His hand tightened on the hilt of his bow, and he felt a strange pull in his chest, a call that seemed to echo in the very depths of his soul. It was then that the vision came to him, sudden and overwhelming. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the world around him had transformed. The grass seemed to shimmer with a golden light, and the sky had deepened into a rich shade of indigo. The spirits of the buffalo, luminous and powerful, surrounded him. They moved like shadows, their forms shifting and flickering. But their eyes, those eyes burned with an ancient wisdom, a knowledge that stretched beyond the boundaries of time. WíiyayA fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the power of the vision. He could hear their voices now, not with his ears, but in his mind, deep within his spirit. The buffalo spirits spoke to him in words he could not fully understand. But their message was clear. The tribe was in danger, and only by embracing the ancient ways, the spiritual connection to the earth and the stars, could they survive the trials that were coming. The spirits showed him glimpses of a future filled with darkness, storms that would rage across the plains, shadowy figures who would trespass on the land, and the buffalo, the very heart of the Arapaho way of life, disappearing from the earth. WíiyayA could feel the weight of their warning pressing on him, a burden he was not sure he could bear. The spirits spoke of a prophecy, one that foretold a great change, a time when the Arapaho people would have to choose between survival and extinction. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the vision faded, the golden light vanished, and the world around him returned to normal. He was once again standing on the plains, his heart racing in his chest. The air felt colder now, the wind sharper, and the sky above was no longer the rich indigo hue it had been moments before. The buffalo were gone, the spirits with them, but the warning they had given him remained, echoing in his mind like a drumbeat. WíiyayA rose to his feet, his mind spinning. He knew that this vision was not just a dream, it was a message, one that he was meant to carry to his people. But how would they respond? How could he convince them that the dangers they faced were not of this world, but of another, a world that could not be seen with the eyes but only felt in the heart? The sound of his brother's voice broke through his thoughts. Thaswank, meaning horse, was calling to him from across the camp. Thaswank was his closest companion, a warrior who had fought by his side in countless battles and hunts. He was the opposite of WíiyayA in many ways, strong, practical, and rooted firmly in the ways of the tribe. Where WíiyayA sought the unseen, Thaswank sought the tangible. But despite their differences, they shared a deep bond. WíiyayA, Thaswank called again, his voice cutting through the morning stillness. WíiyayA turned toward him, his heart still heavy with the weight of the vision. I saw them, he whispered, as if the very words would shatter the silence. The buffalo spirits, they have warned us. Warned us of what? Thaswank asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. What are you talking about? I do not know yet, WíiyayA replied, his voice low. But they spoke of a time of great darkness, a time when we will have to choose between life and death. We will face it together, Thaswank said with a firm nod, though doubt flickered in his eyes. But we must prepare for the hunt first. The tribe depends on us. And so, they joined the others as the hunt began. But in WíiyayA's heart, the spirit's warning lingered, growing louder with each step. He could not shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. As the Arapaho tribe rode out across the plains, their warriors mounted on swift horses and their women and children gathered in the distance, ready to witness the sacred hunt. WíiyayA kept his eyes fixed on the horizon. The plains stretched before him, beautiful and endless, but he could feel the storm brewing on the edge of his vision, a storm that was far more than just weather. This was the storm of destiny, and WíiyayA was the one chosen to face it. The spirits had arrived, and they had brought with them a warning that WíiyayA could not ignore. It was time to prepare for what was to come. The sun rose slowly, casting long shadows over the grasslands as the Arapaho tribe gathered for the annual hunt. It was a sacred event, one that had sustained their people for generations. The buffalo were not just animals. They were the heart of the Arapaho way of life, providing food, clothing, tools, and even spiritual connection. For the tribe, the hunt was not just a physical challenge. It was a spiritual ritual, one that bonded them to the land, to the animals, and to each other. WíiyayA sat silently, watching the preparations. His heart was heavy, still burdened by the warning of the buffalo spirits. He had shared little of his vision with the tribe, unsure of how to convey the gravity of what he had seen. They had enough to worry about. The settlers were encroaching on their lands, and the buffalo herds were beginning to dwindle. There was little time for mystical warnings when survival was at stake. But even as he sat in the quiet of the morning, a sense of unease lingered in the air. The wind was unnaturally still, and the sky, though clear, had an oppressive weight to it, as though it were holding its breath. It was as if the land itself had sensed something was wrong. WíiyayA rose from his place and walked toward the group of hunters, where his brother Thaswank was already preparing his horse. The two of them had hunted together countless times, their bond as brothers and warriors unbreakable. But today, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, a quiet foreboding that hung over them all. Thaswank, WíiyayA said, his voice low, I feel something. The wind, the earth. It is not right today. What do you mean? Thaswank asked, glancing up at him with concern. We have prepared for this hunt for weeks. There is no time for hesitation. I know, WíiyayA replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. But I cannot shake the feeling that something is coming. I saw it in my vision. We have always faced darkness, Thaswank said with a firm nod. It is the way of our people. We must move forward, no matter what. With that, the hunters mounted their horses and set off, riding in a circle as they had done for generations, moving as one. The land stretched before them, vast and endless, a sea of golden grasses rippling in the wind. The buffalo were out there, somewhere, waiting for them. The hunt itself was a spectacle of strength and precision. The tribe moved in perfect harmony, a well-oiled machine, their arrows flying true and their horses swift. It was a beautiful thing to watch, the way the Arapaho worked together, how they relied on each other, how each member played a vital role in ensuring the success of the hunt. It was the epitome of the Arapaho way of life, a testament to their connection with the land and the animals that roamed it. But as the day wore on, something strange began to happen. The buffalo herds were skittish, more elusive than usual. The hunters could sense it. The animals were aware of something that had driven them into hiding. It was not normal behavior for the buffalo, who were usually bold and fearless during the hunt. WíiyayA felt the unease deep in his bones. As they rode across the plains, he could hear the faint sound of hoofbeats in the distance, echoing across the vast expanse. But it was not the sound of buffalo, it was the sound of something else, something far darker. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A shadow fell over the plains, as if the sun had been swallowed by a storm cloud that appeared from nowhere. The air grew cold, and the wind began to pick up, whipping through the grasses in violent gusts. WíiyayA urged his horse forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had heard the stories, the legends of spirits that roamed the land, of ghosts who could take the form of men or animals, of ancient warriors who had never truly left the plains. And then, through the mist, he saw it. A figure appeared in the distance, barely visible at first, but growing clearer with each passing moment. It was a man, or rather, the form of a man, cloaked in shadows, his face obscured by a veil of darkness. He moved with a strange grace, walking toward them as though he belonged there, as though he had always been a part of the land. His steps were silent, but his presence was deafening. The tribe stopped in their tracks, staring at the figure in shock. It was a ghost, that much was clear, but this was no ordinary spirit. This was a warrior, one who had once walked the earth with the Arapaho, but had died long ago. WíiyayA, that was the name WíiyayA had heard in the whispers of the wind. The ghost of an Arapaho warrior who had fallen in battle many seasons ago, his soul never able to find rest. The ghost approached WíiyayA, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. WíiyayA felt a chill run down his spine as the spirit spoke. "WíiyayA, son of the sun," the ghost said, his voice like the wind itself, low and haunting. "You are the one chosen to lead. The time of darkness is upon you. You must prepare the people. They will not understand, but you must make them listen. The buffalo will leave, and the land will grow silent. The spirits are restless, and only you can guide them." WíiyayA stared at the ghost in disbelief. The spirit's words were cryptic, but the meaning was clear. The warning the buffalo spirits had given him was coming to pass. The land was changing, and the Arapaho would need to change with it, or they would perish. The ghost continued, his form flickering like a flame in the wind. "You are the bridge between the worlds," he whispered, before fading into the mist. "Do not forget the path you must walk. WíiyayA, the stone will guide you, but beware, for it carries both power and curse." WíiyayA stood there, frozen in place. As the wind howled around him, the ghost was gone, but the warning lingered, hanging in the air like a shadow. He could feel it deep within him, a sense of destiny pulling him forward. There was no turning back now. As the storm passed and the sky cleared, the hunt resumed, but the spirit of the buffalo seemed to have vanished. The tribe's hunt would not be as fruitful as it had been in years past, and the buffalo, once abundant, were now few and far between. WíiyayA rode back to the camp with the others, his mind swirling with questions. What had the ghost meant by the stone? What was this path he was being asked to walk? And most importantly, what did it mean for his people? He knew that the tribe would have to face something greater than the settlers, something that no weapon or arrow could defeat. The spirits had spoken, and their message was clear. The Arapaho had to find a way to survive not just the physical dangers of the world, but the spiritual ones as well. As the tribe settled around the campfire that night, WíiyayA felt the weight of his vision pressing on him. The darkness was coming, and the Arapaho would need more than strength and courage to face it. They would need the spirits. The plains stretched out beneath the clear sky, endless and beautiful, a sea of gold and green that seemed to go on forever. But beneath the surface of that vast, serene landscape, a change was coming, one that would not only threaten the physical existence of the Arapaho people but challenge their very souls. For WíiyayA, the warning had been clear from the spirits. The buffalo had disappeared, and the land was growing restless. The Arapaho, once united in their connection to the earth, were now divided. There were those who listened to his visions, who believed that the way forward was through understanding the spirit world, while others grew frustrated with his growing reliance on dreams and omens. To them, survival in these troubled times meant strength, courage, and battle. To WíiyayA, it meant something far more profound. The settlers had begun to arrive, at first in small numbers, then in waves. WíiyayA had heard stories of them from the elders, pale-skinned strangers who came with tools and iron, strange languages, and a hunger for the land. They had brought with them both new goods and diseases, but it was their presence, their insistence on claiming the land, that filled the hearts of the Arapaho with dread. These settlers came with no respect for the earth, for the spirits, or for the ways of the native tribes. They saw the plains as empty, as land to be owned, rather than a sacred space shared with the creatures that roamed it. The tension grew as the settlers began to establish their camps along the edges of Arapaho territory, cutting into the lands the tribe had called home for generations. Fences were built where once the wild buffalo had roamed, and small settlements began to spring up where there had once been nothing but the quiet whisper of the wind and the sound of hooves against the earth. The earth, once vibrant and alive, now felt strangled, suffocated by the hands of men who did not understand it. It was during this time that WíiyayA found himself standing at the edge of a new conflict, torn between the demands of his people and the call of the spirits. In the late afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky and the winds carried with them the faint scent of smoke, WíiyayA and Thaswank rode to the northern border of the tribe's land. From their vantage point on the hill, they could see the first signs of settlement, a small group of log cabins, surrounded by fields of crops that had been unnaturally cultivated. The sight filled WíiyayA with unease, the same feeling that had gripped him since the vision of the buffalo spirits. These settlers were not just encroaching on their land, they were disrupting the balance of life itself. "Thaswank," WíiyayA said, his voice tight with emotion, "the spirits have warned me, but I fear our people do not understand. They will not listen. The settlers are here now, and they are not going anywhere," Thaswank replied, his eyes narrowing as he watched the distant smoke. "We have fought for our land before, and we will fight again if we must." "I know," WíiyayA said quietly, "but this is different. The battle we face is not just one of flesh and blood. It is a battle for our spirits." For a moment, there was silence between the two brothers, the weight of the words settling between them like the growing shadows of dusk. "You speak of spirits, WíiyayA, but we need food and shelter. We need to defend ourselves," Thaswank said, his voice rising with frustration. "I understand your visions, but the people need something more than dreams. They need action." WíiyayA clenched his fists, his eyes fixed on the distant settlement. He could feel the presence of something dark on the wind, something that was coming for them, not just from the settlers, but from the land itself. The spirits had spoken of it, the darkness that would consume the plains. What if that darkness was not just the settlers, but something far more insidious, something that had been lurking beneath the surface of the earth, waiting for the right moment to emerge? "We must find another way," WíiyayA said, his voice steady. "If we fight them with weapons, we will be no better than they are. We must show them that the land belongs to the spirits. If they do not respect the earth, we will lose more than our homes. We will lose our souls." As Thaswank looked at him, a flash of doubt crossed his face. But before he could respond, a shout echoed from behind them. "WíiyayA! Thaswank!" The two brothers turned to see a small group of Arapaho scouts riding toward them. At the front was Aha, an older warrior who had been a close friend of their father. He looked grim, his face tight with worry. "The settlers are not the only danger we face," Ha said, dismounting quickly. "There are strange things happening on the plains. The animals are behaving oddly. The buffalo have all but disappeared. And we've heard rumors of something else. Something dark and powerful that moves through the land." "Darkness?" WíiyayA asked, his heart tightening. "What do you mean?" Aha glanced over his shoulder, as if to make sure no one else was listening. "I cannot say for certain, but there are whispers of shadows in the night, of figures who appear and disappear without a trace. Some believe they are the spirits of the old ones, but others think it is something else, something that has awakened from deep beneath the earth." WíiyayA felt a chill run through him. The spirits had spoken of a great darkness, and now it seemed that darkness was rising from the earth itself. He could not ignore it. The group rode back to the camp, where the elders had gathered to discuss their next steps. The tension was palpable, everyone could feel it, but no one knew exactly what to do. The tribe was divided. There were those who wanted to fight the settlers, to defend their land with force, but WíiyayA knew that fighting them in the old way, with arrows and spears, would not be enough. The darkness the spirits had warned him of was coming, and the tribe needed to be ready, not just in body, but in spirit. That night, as the tribe sat around the fire, WíiyayA spoke of the vision the spirits had given him, of the warning they had delivered through the buffalo and the ghost of WíiyayA. He spoke of the darkness that was approaching, not just from the settlers, but from the very heart of the land. The elders listened in silence, their faces grave. Some nodded, as if understanding the depth of WíiyayA's words. Others looked away, unwilling to believe that the tribe's future could be threatened by anything more than the settlers. "We must prepare," WíiyayA said, his voice strong. "We must learn to listen to the spirits again. We must find the path that will guide us through the darkness." But even as he spoke, Daswank remained silent, his face tight with uncertainty. He did not fully believe in the spirits, not like his brother did. The weight of their situation pressed down on him, and he wondered if there was more to fear than just the settlers. As the night wore on, the fire flickered, casting long shadows across the faces of the Arapaho. The darkness was coming, of that WíiyayA was certain. The only question was whether his people would be ready for it. The days that followed the arrival of the settlers were marked by a growing unease that settled like a heavy fog over the Arapaho camp. The hunters had returned with little game, the buffalo scarce and difficult to find. The land, once so abundant, seemed to be turning against them. Even the spirits, who had once whispered in the wind and guided the people with gentle hands, now seemed distant, shrouded in a silence that felt ominous. WíiyayA could feel the weight of his people's uncertainty pressing down on him. The elders spoke of resistance, of standing firm against the settlers and defending the land with their lives. But WíiyayA knew that the battle they were facing was not one of physical might. It was a spiritual war, one that would require more than just strength and weapons to survive. It was during this time of uncertainty that the elders called for the rite of passage, a sacred journey that would test the strength and spirit of the tribe's young warriors. The rite of passage was an ancient tradition, one that every Arapaho warrior had to undergo to prove their worth and earn their place among the tribe's leaders. It was a rite of transformation, a journey into the heart of the wilderness, where each warrior would confront their deepest fears and emerge stronger, wiser, and more connected to the spirits of the earth. WíiyayA was chosen to lead the rite of passage. Despite his youth, his visions, his connection to the spirits had set him apart from the other warriors. It was believed that the spirits had chosen him for this role, and now he would have to prove himself not just as a warrior, but as a spiritual guide for his people. The rite began at dawn, when the sun had just begun to rise and the land was bathed in the soft light of early morning. WíiyayA stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the young warriors gathered, their faces painted in the traditional symbols of strength and bravery. Each of them was preparing to face their own trials, to venture into the wilderness alone and find their way back to the camp after a week's journey. The ritual was simple in its structure. Each warrior would spend a week alone in the wilderness, fasting, meditating, and listening to the spirits. They were to seek a vision, a sign from the earth or the heavens that would guide them in the coming trials. The journey was one of self-discovery, a way of proving that they were ready to take on the responsibilities of adulthood and leadership. But for WíiyayA, the journey held deeper meaning. He had already been given a vision, a prophecy of darkness and struggle, and he knew that the stakes of this trial were far higher than mere personal growth. The tribe's survival depended on the wisdom that he would gain in these woods, and he could not afford to fail. As WíiyayA led the young warriors into the wilderness, the land seemed to respond to their presence. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the sounds of distant animals echoed in the distance. The journey took them deep into the heart of the forest, where the trees grew tall and the earth felt ancient, untouched by human hands. It was a place where the veil between the physical world and the spiritual realm was thin, a place where the spirits of the land could be felt in every breath of wind and every rustle of leaves. The warriors were left to fend for themselves, to find shelter, food, and water, but most importantly, to listen, to hear the messages that the spirits had for them. WíiyayA found his place by the edge of a stream, where the water flowed clear and pure. He built a small fire and sat in silence, his thoughts drifting between the physical world and the world of dreams. The first night passed quietly, but the second night brought with it something unexpected. In the darkness, WíiyayA felt a presence. It was not the presence of the animals or the wind. This was something else, something ancient and powerful. He looked up to the stars, feeling their gaze upon him, and he saw it, a shadow, moving across the sky, a dark figure that seemed to move between the stars. This shape impossible to define. The figure seemed to flicker, like a flame blown by the wind, but it was unmistakably there, watching him. As the shadow grew larger, WíiyayA felt a strange sensation in his chest, a pull, as if the figure was calling to him, beckoning him to follow. His heart raced, and he stood, unsure of what to do. The figure was so close now that he could feel its presence in the very air around him. It was a ghost, a spirit from another world, and yet it felt like something more. WíiyayA, a voice whispered, soft and insistent. It was not a voice that came from the figure itself, but from deep within his own mind, as though the figure was speaking directly to his soul. WíiyayA, you must choose the path of the warrior or the path of the spirit. The darkness is coming, and only you can guide your people. But the path you must walk is not one of bloodshed, but of sacrifice. The stone you hold, it will give you the power, but beware, it will take much from you in return. Asterisk. WíiyayA closed his eyes, trying to steady his breath. The vision was so vivid, so real, that it felt as though the shadow had entered his very being. The stone the spirit spoke of, the stone he had been given during his earlier visions, was a powerful artifact, one that connected him to the spirits of the land. But WíiyayA knew that it came with a price. The more he used its power, the more he risked losing himself to the darkness. I will walk the path of the spirit, WíiyayA whispered, his voice steady despite the terror he felt. I will guide my people, not with violence, but with wisdom. The shadow seemed to smile, its form flickering in and out of existence like a mirage. Then the spirits will guide you, WíiyayA. But know this, you will face trials beyond what you can imagine. Your soul will be tested, and the fate of your people will rest in your hands. With that, the shadow vanished, and the air grew still once more. WíiyayA was left alone, his mind racing with the weight of the decision he had just made. He had chosen the path of the spirit, but the cost of that choice was still unknown. The rest of the week passed in a blur. WíiyayA meditated and fasted, seeking clarity, but the visions continued to haunt him. Each night, the shadow would return, growing more vivid, more insistent, and each time, WíiyayA would hear the same words, words that filled him with both fear and determination. By the time the rite of passage came to an end, WíiyayA had learned what he needed to know. The darkness was coming, not just from the settlers, but from within the land itself. The balance between the physical and spiritual realms was unraveling, and only WíiyayA had the power to restore it. But the road ahead would not be easy. The spirits had spoken, and their message was clear: to save his people, WíiyayA would have to sacrifice everything. As he returned to the camp, his heart heavy with the knowledge he had gained, WíiyayA knew that the time for choosing was over. The tribe would have to follow him into the unknown, into the darkness, and only through unity and understanding would they survive. But the journey had only just begun. The days were growing shorter, the nights colder. The winds had begun to shift, carrying with them the scent of something unfamiliar, something wrong. The Arapaho camp was restless, its people on edge, waiting for the storm that had been foretold. The buffalo had not returned, and the settlers continued to encroach upon the lands that had been home to the Arapaho for generations. The tribe, once united, was now divided between those who wished to fight the settlers with force and those who, like WíiyayA, believed that the true battle was a spiritual one. Despite his visions, despite the warnings of the spirits, WíiyayA had been unable to convince the tribe to take the path of wisdom and understanding. Tensions were rising, and soon the battle would come, not only between the settlers and the Arapaho, but between the heart and soul of the tribe itself. The question had become, could the Arapaho survive in a world that no longer seemed to have a place for them? As the time drew near, WíiyayA sought the counsel of the spirits once more. He retreated into the wilderness, alone, seeking a vision, a sign, anything that could guide him through the coming darkness. The stone that had once connected him to the spirits now pulsed with an intensity that both comforted and terrified him. It was as if the very earth itself was calling to him, urging him to act. In the solitude of the forest, beneath the vast expanse of stars, WíiyayA was once again visited by the shadow, the same dark figure that had haunted his dreams and guided him in the rite of passage. This time, however, the figure did not speak of trials or sacrifices. Instead, it was calm, his presence a steady force that filled WíiyayA with both peace and sorrow. You have chosen the path of the spirit. WíiyayA, the time of darkness has come, and it will not be easily undone. But the power you seek is within you, within your people. The stone you carry, it is not just a tool. It is the key to unlocking the power of the land itself. You must lead your people, not with force, but with the strength of unity, the strength of the earth. The shadow's form flickered like a flame in the wind, its shape shifting with each breath of air. The buffalo will return, but they will not return to the old ways. The land will heal, but only if you are willing to sacrifice what is most precious to you. The spirits are with you, WíiyayA, but you must show your people that the only way forward is through balance, through understanding. If you fail, all will be lost. The shadow faded, leaving WíiyayA standing alone in the cold, the weight of its words pressing down on him. He had always known that his journey would not be easy, but now he understood the full depth of the sacrifice that would be required to save his people, to restore the balance of the land. WíiyayA would have to give up everything: his power, his connection to the spirits, and perhaps even his place among the living. The next morning, WíiyayA returned to the camp, his mind made up. The tribe would have to face the coming storm, but not with weapons or anger. Instead, they would need to embrace the spiritual strength that had once bound them to the land. He called a meeting with the tribe's elders and warriors, urging them to listen to the spirits and prepare not for war, but for the restoration of the earth itself. There is no victory in bloodshed, WíiyayA said, his voice clear and strong. We must learn to live in harmony with the earth, as we once did. The buffalo are not just animals. They are part of our soul. And the land is not something we can own. It is something we must protect. If we are to survive, we must learn to listen to the spirits once more, to walk the path of balance. First, the tribe resisted. Thaswank, his brother, stood before him, his face hard with doubt. You ask us to give up our strength, to give up our warrior's way, but we cannot survive without fighting for our land. What will we do when the settlers come? What will we do when they take everything we have left? WíiyayA felt his heart ache as he looked into his brother's eyes, knowing that this moment was the true test of their bond. He had always trusted in his brother's strength, but now the time had come for Thaswank to see what WíiyayA had seen. We will do what the spirits have asked of us. WíiyayA replied softly, we will fight, but not with weapons. We will fight with unity, with understanding. We will fight with the power of the earth itself. The battle that followed was not one of swords and arrows. Instead, it was a spiritual war, fought between the spirits of the land and the settlers who sought to claim it. The Arapaho gathered in a circle, chanting the ancient prayers of their people, calling upon the buffalo spirits, the earth spirits, and the ancestors to stand with them. The air hummed with energy as the spirits answered their call, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. The settlers, who had been steadily encroaching on the land, found themselves caught in a strange and unnatural storm. The skies darkened, the winds howled, and the earth shook. The buffalo, which had been missing for so long, appeared in great herds, their massive forms silhouetted against the storm. The settlers were driven back, their resolve shattered by the sudden, overwhelming force of nature. But WíiyayA knew that this was not a victory for the Arapaho alone. It was a victory for the earth, for the balance that had been disrupted, and for the spirits who had guided them. As the storm passed and the earth calmed, the buffalo remained, their return a sign of hope and renewal. The tribe had not won through force, but through unity, through understanding the true power of the land and the spirits. WíiyayA had shown them the way, a path not of destruction, but of restoration. In the days that followed, the Arapaho rebuilt their homes, their lives, and their connection to the land. The buffalo returned in greater numbers, their presence a symbol of the tribe's renewed bond with the earth. WíiyayA became a leader, not through strength of arms, but through the strength of his spirit, his ability to listen, to understand, and to guide his people through the darkness. And so, the Arapaho people survived. They did not conquer the world around them. They learned to live with it, to respect it, and to honor the spirits that watched over them. The darkness that had once threatened to consume them was vanquished, not through violence, but through wisdom and sacrifice. And in the end, the light returned not as a force of destruction, but as a force of renewal.